The 3 blinking dots on my screen felt like a countdown to my own execution, but nothing could have prepared me for the single terrifying message that followed. I would recognize that sapphire ring anywhere. Bring my pup to my penthouse tomorrow morning, or I will tear this city apart to find you. If you are ready for a thrilling, heart-pounding girl love story full of billionaire secrets, powerful alpha drama, and an unexpected romance that will keep you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what you think will happen next. Now, let's dive into the story. Part 1. The automatic doors of the downtown medical clinic slid open, releasing me into the biting autumn wind. The chill in the Seattle air was absolutely nothing compared to the ice currently freezing the blood in my veins. I stood on the pavement for a long time, the gray clouds overhead threatening to unleash a torrential downpour, but I barely registered the weather. My fingers were trembling so violently that I could barely keep my grip on the glossy square of thermal paper clutched in my right hand. My name is Olivia. I am an Omega. More specifically, I was an Omega who had been told by 3 different top-tier medical specialists that my chances of ever having a child were practically zero. I had spent years making peace with that devastatingly cruel fact, burying my quiet sorrow beneath a mountain of late-night shifts at a low-paying graphic design firm and maintaining a solitary, peaceful, predictable life. I had accepted my fate. But the little black and white smudge on the ultrasound paper I was currently staring at told a completely different, impossible story. Pregnant. 8 weeks pregnant. I stumbled toward the nearest bus stop, my mind spinning in a chaotic, deafening whirlwind of panic, disbelief, and a strange, terrifying spark of joy that I didn't dare acknowledge. How was this even possible? My Omega biology had supposedly failed me years ago. But deep down, I knew exactly how it had happened. My mind immediately flashed back to exactly 2 months ago, a night I had tried desperately to erase from my memory out of pure, unadulterated shame and fear. It was the annual Sterling Enterprise Masquerade Gala. I was never supposed to be anywhere near that event. My best friend, Chloe, worked in the high-end catering department and had smuggled me in through the service entrance just so I could catch a glimpse of the opulent, glittering ballroom and the ridiculously wealthy elite women of the city. I was supposed to stay hidden behind the towering champagne pyramids. I was supposed to keep my head down and my scent blockers securely patched on my neck. But then, the overwhelming, suffocating heat of an unexpected pre-cycle had hit me out of nowhere, burning through my suppressants like a wildfire and leaving me dizzy, feverish, and desperate for air. I had stumbled away from the crowds, pushing through a set of heavy mahogany doors into one of the private, velvet-draped VIP corridors, gasping for breath, when I collided solidly with her. Even now, standing in the freezing rain with the traffic roaring past me, the mere memory of her scent made my knees buckle. She smelled like crushed pine needles, rich dark chocolate, and the sharp, intoxicating ozone of a thunderstorm. She was an alpha. Not just any alpha, but a woman whose sheer magnetic presence radiated an agonizing amount of power, wealth, and dominance. She had been wearing a sharp, impeccably tailored black tuxedo that hugged her athletic frame perfectly, and a silver, jewel-encrusted half-mask that obscured her upper features, leaving only the piercing, ruthless intensity of her icy blue eyes and the sharp line of her jaw visible. I was completely out of my mind with the sudden fever of my cycle. And she was clearly dealing with the dangerous, possessive edge of her own alpha rut. What happened next in the dim shadows of that opulent, locked VIP suite was a beautiful, terrifying blur of crushed velvet, desperate whispers, and an undeniable magnetic pull that I had never experienced in my entire 24 years of existence. She had been so fiercely possessive, backing me against the wall with effortless strength, yet surprisingly, devastatingly gentle. She murmured sweet, heavy promises against my skin in a deep, husky voice that still haunted my dreams every single night. But when the first light of dawn had finally broken through the heavy curtains, reality came crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. The haze lifted. I was a nobody Omega, barely scraping by on minimum wage, lying in a bed with an elite billionaire alpha who would probably throw me out like discarded trash the moment she woke up and realized what she had done with a stranger. So I ran. I gathered my clothes, slipped out of the suite, sneaked out of the hotel, and sprinted all the way back to my tiny, run-down apartment. The only thing I took with me was a heavy, ornate silver ring set with a massive, square-cut sapphire. She had slipped it onto my right thumb at some point during the night, her deep voice rumbling against my ear as she dominantly declared that I was hers. I had been too terrified to take it off ever since, wearing it on my thumb as a constant, secret, foolish reminder of the only night I had ever truly felt alive. A loud honk from a passing taxi jolted me violently back to the present. The rain had finally started to fall, heavy, freezing drops soaking through my thin trench coat. I hurried down the street, ducking into the dim, flickeringly lit stairwell of my apartment building. My heart was still hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird desperately trying to escape a cage. I needed to talk to someone immediately. I needed Chloe. She was the only person on Earth who knew I had snuck into that gala, the only person who knew I had vanished for the night. I aggressively unlocked my apartment door, throwing my keys onto the chipped kitchen counter and collapsing onto my faded, second-hand velvet sofa. The silence of the apartment felt heavy and suffocating. I pulled out my phone, my hands still shaking uncontrollably. Chloe had just texted me from a brand new number 2 days ago, complaining in all caps about how she had dropped her old phone in a deep fryer at the restaurant. I pulled up my contacts, quickly typing in the 10 digits she had given me. My vision was blurry with unshed, terrified tears, my mind moving a million miles a minute. I laid the glossy ultrasound photo delicately on my lap. The sapphire ring on my thumb gleamed brightly, catching the harsh yellow light of my living room lamp, resting right next to the image of the tiny, impossible life growing inside of me. I snapped a picture of the ultrasound, making sure the little bean-shaped smudge was perfectly in focus. Then I attached the photo to a new message and began to type furiously. Chloe, please tell me you're awake. I am absolutely panicking right now. You know that crazy night at the gala 2 months ago? The one I told you we could never, ever talk about again? Well, the impossible just happened. The doctors were wrong about me. I'm pregnant. I have no idea who the female alpha was. She was wearing a mask, but I'm terrified. I'm so scared. What am I going to do? Please call me the second you see this. I took a deep, shaky breath, closing my eyes tightly as I pressed the send button. The little swoosh sound echoed in the quiet room. I let my head fall back against the sofa cushions, waiting for the inevitable string of shocked emojis, curse words, and all caps screaming from my best friend. 1 minute passed. Then 2. I opened my eyes and looked at the screen. The message status suddenly changed to read. I let out a heavy breath of relief. Thank God she was on her phone. I watched anxiously as the 3 little gray dots appeared on the left side of the screen, indicating that she was typing. The dots vanished. Then they appeared again. It seemed like she was typing a massive paragraph, which was very on-brand for Chloe's dramatic personality. Finally, a single short message popped up on my screen. Who is this? My brow furrowed in utter confusion. I stared at the words, blinking hard. Did she forget to save my number in her new phone? I quickly started typing back, rolling my eyes despite my panic. Very funny, Chloe. It's Olivia. Please stop messing around. I am literally having a panic attack over here. The message delivered. Almost instantly, it was marked as read. The 3 dots appeared again, but this time they stayed on the screen for a terrifyingly long time. A creeping sensation of absolute dread began to pool in the pit of my stomach. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt thick, almost heavy, as if the air pressure in the room had shifted and dropped. My phone buzzed violently in my hand, making me jump out of my skin. A new message had come through. This is not Chloe. My blood ran ice cold. I stared at the screen, my eyes widening in pure horror. I quickly backed out of the chat and looked at the number at the top of the screen. My heart stopped beating. I had swapped the last 2 digits. Instead of ending in an 89, my shaking, panicked fingers had typed 98. I had just sent my deepest, most agonizing secret, along with a highly sensitive medical document, to a complete stranger. Oh my God, I am so sorry. I typed frantically, my thumb slipping over the glass screen in my haste. Please delete that picture immediately. It was a wrong number. I am so incredibly sorry to bother you. Have a good day. I aggressively moved my thumb to block the number, wanting to erase this humiliating, terrifying mistake from existence. But before I could hit the block button, the 3 dots appeared again. And then, a notification popped up at the top of my screen that made my breath catch violently in my throat. The recipient has taken a screenshot of your chat. My lungs seized. Why would a stranger take a screenshot of my ultrasound? The phone buzzed again. The message was longer this time. I don't care about your apology. I was about to ignore this and block you. But then I zoomed in on the photograph. Your thumb is resting on the edge of the paper. I stared at the words, my brain struggling to comprehend what was happening. I slowly looked down at my own hand, my eyes locking onto the heavy, intricate silver band and the massive square-cut sapphire gleaming under the lamp. Another message appeared, striking me like a physical blow. I had that ring custom-made in Milan 5 years ago. There is only one in the entire world. And the last time I saw it, it was on the night of my company's masquerade gala, right before the Omega who stole my mind slipped out of my bed like a thief in the night. The phone slipped from my sweaty palm, tumbling onto the rug with a dull thud. My lungs absolutely refused to take in air. The room began to spin violently. Couldn't be. The mathematical probability of this happening was literally impossible. Out of the millions of phone numbers in this city, out of the billions of people in the world, what were the chances that my trembling, panicked fingers had accidentally dialed her? Before I could even lean down to pick up the device, the screen lit up with another message. I could read it perfectly from where it lay on the floor, the stark white text burning itself into my retinas. I would recognize that sapphire ring anywhere. You ran from me. Bring my pup to my penthouse tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., or I will tear this city apart to find you. Do not test me, Olivia. She knew my name. I hadn't given her my name that night. I hadn't told her who I was. But she knew. Her power and reach were already suffocating me. Suddenly, the screen changed. Text messages disappeared, replaced by an incoming call screen. An unsaved number. The exact same number. The phone vibrated violently against the floorboards, the sound echoing through the room like a warning siren. I sat there, paralyzed, unable to look away from the glowing screen. The ruthless, terrifyingly powerful female alpha I had been running from for 2 months had just found me. And now she knew she was going to be a mother. The phone just kept ringing. End of part 1. Part 2. The relentless, aggressive vibration of the phone against the scratched hardwood floor of my apartment felt like a localized earthquake. Incoming call, unknown. I sat perfectly frozen on the faded velvet cushions of my secondhand sofa, my breath completely trapped in my lungs. The glowing screen illuminated the dark, cramped living room, casting long, menacing shadows across the peeling wallpaper. I knew exactly who was on the other end of that line. The ruthless, billionaire female alpha whose bed I had fled 2 months ago. The woman whose custom sapphire ring was currently burning a hole into my right thumb. With trembling hands and a heart that felt like it was going to beat right out of my chest, I slid off the couch and reached for the device. My finger hovered over the red decline button, every single survival instinct in my Omega biology screaming at me to reject the call, smash the phone to pieces, pack a single duffel bag, and leave Seattle tonight. But the chilling words from her text message echoed loudly in my mind. I will tear this city apart to find you. She was a billionaire. She had resources, security teams, and power that I couldn't even begin to fathom. Running again would only make an alpha like her infinitely angrier. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself, and swiped the green button, bringing the phone slowly to my ear. For a terrifying, agonizing 3 seconds, there was absolutely nothing but the sound of static and the faint hum of city traffic in the background. Then a voice spoke. It was a woman's voice, deep, smooth as expensive velvet, and dripping with an absolute terrifying authority that sent a violent shiver straight down my spine. I was beginning to think you were going to force me to track the GPS coordinates of your phone, Olivia. Hearing my name on her lips sounded like a physical possession. Claim. I swallowed hard, my throat sandpaper dry, trying desperately to find my voice. How do you know my name? I whispered, my voice shaking so badly I barely recognized it myself. A low, dark chuckle vibrated through the speaker, a sound so rich and dominant that it made the fine hairs on my arms stand straight up. The sheer alpha magnetism in her voice was completely overwhelming, even through a cellular connection. Did you really think I wouldn't find out the name of the woman who drove me out of my mind and then vanished without a single trace? You left nothing behind in my suite but the scent of vanilla and rain on my silk sheets. Took my private security team exactly 48 hours to identify you from the gala's surveillance footage. Olivia Hayes, 24, junior graphic designer at a failing firm. An Omega. My heart hammered against my ribs like a frantic drum. She had investigated me. She knew everything. If you knew who I was, if you knew where I lived and worked, why didn't you come for me? Because I am not a monster, little Omega, she replied, her tone dropping a full octave, becoming softer but infinitely more dangerous. You were terrified that morning. I pushed you too far during the peak of my rut. I decided to give you time to breathe. I was going to approach you this week properly. On my terms. But then... She paused, and I could vividly hear the sharp clink of a heavy crystal glass being set down on a solid wooden desk. Then you decided to send a picture of an ultrasound to my private, unlisted business cell phone. A number that, ironically, differs from your best friend's by exactly 1 digit. Hot, frustrated tears pricked the corners of my eyes. It was an accident. A stupid, reckless mistake. I thought I was texting Chloe. I swear to you, it is the best mistake you have ever made in your entire life, the alpha said, her voice turning completely rigid, devoid of any previous warmth. Playful edge was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated steel. I do not share what is mine, and I certainly do not abandon my own blood. You will be in the lobby of the Sterling Tower tomorrow morning at precisely 8 a.m. My head of security will escort you up to the penthouse. Do not make me come down there and drag you out of that miserable apartment myself. Am I understood? You can't just order me around, I started, a sudden desperate spark of defensive anger flaring in my chest. Am I understood, Olivia? She repeated, the sheer, crushing dominance in her alpha tone forcing my Omega instincts into immediate, involuntary submission. My body betrayed me, a soft whine building in the back of my throat. Yes, I breathed out, hating the way I melted at the sound of her command. Good girl, she murmured, her voice wrapping around me like a warm, heavy blanket. The line went dead. I dropped the phone, gasping for air as if I had just been held underwater for minutes. I wrapped my arms tightly around my knees, pulling them to my chest as I sat on the floor. Tomorrow. I was going to face her tomorrow. Her name was Ava Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises and the most formidable, untouchable female alpha in the country. And against all medical odds, I was carrying her child. The rest of the night passed in a miserable, agonizing blur of pure anxiety. I didn't sleep a single wink. I couldn't. I paced the uneven floorboards of my tiny apartment, packing and unpacking a small canvas bag, drinking endless cups of bitter chamomile tea that did absolutely nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. By the time the sun began to peek over the Seattle skyline, casting a gray, dismal, rainy light into my living room, I felt like a walking ghost. I showered, letting the scalding hot water beat against my back, though it did little to melt the solid block of ice in my veins. Afterward, I stood in front of my closet, staring blankly at my meager, inexpensive wardrobe. How do you dress for a meeting with a billionaire who accidentally got you pregnant? I finally settled on a simple, high-necked black turtleneck and a pair of professional, wide-leg gray trousers. I wanted to look guarded. I wanted to look like I wasn't utterly intimidated, even though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely button my pants. I slipped my favorite oversized beige cardigan over my shoulders, wrapping it tightly around my middle. I desperately wanted to hide the fact that there was a life growing inside me, even if the tiny 8-week bump wasn't visibly showing yet. Before I left, I looked down at my right hand. The sapphire ring. I grabbed the silver band and pulled, twisting and tugging at it until my knuckle turned bright red, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it had fused to my skin the night she put it there. Giving up with an exhausted sigh, I grabbed my worn leather purse, stepped out into the freezing Seattle rain, and headed toward the financial district. The Sterling Tower was a massive, intimidating monument of glass and steel that pierced the gloomy sky right in the heart of downtown. Standing at the base of it, I felt smaller than an insect. I pushed through the heavy, gleaming revolving doors, my wet boots clicking softly against the pristine, polished marble floors of the lobby. I glanced at the giant clock on the wall. It was exactly 7:55 a.m. Before I could even approach the massive main reception desk, a tall, imposing woman in a sharp, tailored black suit stepped directly into my path. She had an earpiece curled around her ear, a sharp undercut, and a very serious, unreadable expression. "Miss Hayes?" she asked, her tone entirely businesslike, scanning me from head to toe. I swallowed hard, clutching the strap of my purse like a lifeline. "Yes, that's me. Miss Sterling is expecting you. Please follow me." She didn't wait for a reply. I hurried after her, my heart pounding a frantic, terrifying rhythm against my ribcage. We bypassed the regular, crowded banks of elevators where employees in expensive suits were swiping their badges. Instead, we walked toward a sleek, unmarked set of stainless steel doors at the very back of the lobby, guarded by 2 more men in suits. The woman swiped a sleek black keycard, and the doors slid open with a quiet, expensive hiss. I stepped inside, the security head following right behind me. There were no buttons in this elevator. Just a smooth steel panel. It was a direct, express ride to the top. My stomach dropped into my shoes as the elevator shot upwards at a dizzying, ear-popping speed. My palms were sweating so profusely I had to discreetly wipe them on my trousers. What was I going to say to her? What did she want from me? Was she going to offer me money to go away? Or worse, was she going to try and take the baby away from me once it was born? The mere thought made a fierce, protective omega growl rumble deep in my throat, surprising even me. I rested a protective hand over my flat stomach, hidden beneath the beige cardigan. I wouldn't let her. No matter how much money, influence, or power Ava Sterling possessed, she was not taking my child from me. I would fight her with everything I had. With a soft, melodic ding, the elevator came to a smooth halt. The doors slid open, revealing an entryway that was larger and more luxurious than my entire apartment floor plan. The floors were rich, dark mahogany, and the walls were adorned with modern art that probably cost more than my entire life's earnings. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying, panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, the rain lashing aggressively against the reinforced glass. "Straight ahead," the security woman instructed, stepping back into the elevator. The doors closed silently, leaving me completely alone in the sprawling, opulent penthouse. I took a deep, shaky breath, and the scent of the penthouse immediately hit my sensitive nose. It was her. The air was thick with the intoxicating, dominant blend of crushed pine needles, dark chocolate, and the sharp bite of ozone. It was overwhelming, wrapping around me like a heavy, comforting blanket. My omega instincts flared instantly, my inner wolf practically purring at the proximity to the alpha who had claimed me. I hated it. I hated how my body violently betrayed my logical mind. "You're precisely on time," a voice noted from the shadows of the expansive living area. "I appreciate punctuality." I froze. My eyes darted toward the sound. Ava Sterling stepped out from behind a massive, custom-built curved desk. My breath hitched. She was even more breathtakingly beautiful than I remembered from the dark shadows of that hotel suite. She was tall, standing easily at 6 feet, with a lean, powerful, and distinctly athletic build that her custom-tailored dark navy suit couldn't hide. Her raven black hair was swept back elegantly, a few stray strands falling effortlessly across her sharp forehead. But it was her eyes that made me stop breathing altogether. Without the silver mask hiding her face, I could fully see them. They were a piercing, icy blue, sharp enough to cut glass, and they were locked onto me with a terrifying, possessive intensity. She walked slowly toward me, her gaze raking over my trembling frame, taking in the oversized sweater and the protective way my arms were crossed over my stomach. She moved with the predatory, silent grace of a snow leopard. Every single step she took seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room. "I see you're still wearing it," Ava said, her icy eyes dropping specifically to my right hand. She stopped just a few feet away from me. The sheer heat radiating off her body was palpable. I instinctively hid my hand behind my back, lifting my chin to glare at her, trying to summon every ounce of bravery I possessed. I couldn't get it off. Trust me, I tried with soap, lotion, everything. A small, dangerous, devastatingly attractive smirk played on Ava's perfectly sculpted lips. "Omega," she murmured, taking another deliberate step forward until she was entirely in my personal space, towering over me. "Do not lie to me. You kept it because a part of you knew you belonged to me the moment I touched you." "I don't belong to anyone," I snapped, though my voice wavered pitifully, entirely lacking the venom I had intended. I stepped back, my spine hitting the cold, hard glass of the floor-to-ceiling window behind me. I was completely trapped. Ava didn't stop. She closed the remaining distance, lifting one strong hand and pressing it flat against the glass right next to my head, effectively caging me in. She leaned down, her face mere inches from mine. I could feel her breath ghosting across my cheek, hot and smelling faintly of expensive black coffee and mint. My heart felt like it was going to burst through my ribs. "You belong to me," Ava corrected softly, her tone leaving zero room for argument. Her icy blue eyes dropped to my trembling lips before locking onto my terrified gaze. "And more importantly, the pup you are currently carrying belongs to the Sterling lineage. Now let's stop playing these little games, Olivia. We have a lot of living arrangements to make, and you are not leaving this penthouse until every single one of my demands is met." End of Part 2. Part 3. The cold, hard glass of the floor-to-ceiling window bit through the thin fabric of my cardigan, a stark contrast to the absolute furnace of heat radiating from the imposing female alpha standing mere inches from me. Ava Sterling's hand was still planted flat against the glass right next to my head. We were so close that every time she exhaled, I could feel the warm brush of her breath against my cheek. My heart was hammering a frantic, bird-like rhythm against my ribs, so loud I was certain she could hear it. "Living arrangements?" I choked out, the words feeling like sandpaper in my dry throat. "What are you talking about? I have an apartment. I have a job. You can't just snap your fingers and dictate my entire life just because of one night." "That is exactly what I can do, Olivia," Ava replied smoothly, her voice a low, dangerous purr that vibrated deep in my chest. Her icy blue eyes never left mine, tracing the terrified, wide-eyed expression on my face. "Your apartment is located in a high-crime district with a faulty heating system and a mold problem in the basement. I had my security team run a full background check on the building the moment I found out who you were. It is not a suitable environment for an Omega, and it is certainly not a suitable environment for the heir to the Sterling Empire." My jaw dropped in sheer disbelief. "You investigated my building? Are you insane? You have no right to look into my private life." "I have every right," Ava countered, her tone hardening, the alpha command bleeding back into her words. "You are carrying my pup. That makes your well-being my absolute primary concern. You will not be returning to that shoebox. I have already sent a team to pack up your personal belongings. Whatever you need will be brought here by this evening. Your lease has been broken and your landlord has been compensated." "You did what?" I shouted, my sudden surge of furious adrenaline temporarily overriding the crippling fear of her alpha presence. I shoved my hands hard against her tailored shoulders, trying to push her away. It was like trying to push a solid marble statue. She didn't budge a single millimeter. You can't do that. You don't own me, Ava. Ava's eyes darkened at the sound of her first name falling from my lips. A low, possessive growl vibrated in the back of her throat, a deeply primal sound that immediately made my knees weak. Before I could process what was happening, her other hand shot out, her long, elegant fingers wrapping securely around my waist. She didn't hurt me, but her grip was an iron vice, pulling my body flush against hers. The intoxicating, heavy scent of crushed pine needles, dark chocolate, and ozone crashed over me like a tidal wave. My Omega instincts, which I had spent years trying to suppress with cheap suppressants, flared to life with terrifying intensity. My body recognized her. My inner wolf was practically whimpering in submission, craving the scent of her alpha. "Careful, little Omega," Ava whispered, leaning in so close that her lips brushed the shell of my ear. I shivered violently. "Do not test my patience today. My protective instincts are currently in overdrive, and your defiance is making my blood boil. You are moving into this penthouse. You will be provided with the best medical care on the West Coast. You will want for absolutely nothing. Those are my terms, and they are non-negotiable." Tears of pure, frustrated helplessness welled in my eyes. I hated how powerless I felt. I had spent my entire adult life scraping by, fighting tooth and nail to maintain my independence in a world built for alphas and betas. And now, in the blink of an eye, this towering, terrifying billionaire had stripped it all away. A single tear spilled over my lower lash line, tracking a hot path down my cheek. The moment the tear fell, the heavy, suffocating tension in the room snapped. Ava's entire posture changed. Predatory stiffness melted from her broad shoulders. An alpha's greatest weakness was the distress of their omega, and though I wasn't officially hers, the biological pull between us was undeniable. Ava lifted her hand from the glass. With agonizing gentleness, she brushed the pad of her thumb across my cheek, catching the tear before it could reach my jaw. Her touch was scorching hot against my skin. "Don't cry," she murmured, her voice losing its icy edge, replaced by a thick, velvety softness that completely threw me off balance. "I am not trying to imprison you, Olivia. I am trying to protect you. The world out there is ruthless, and you are vulnerable right now. Let me take care of what is mine." She didn't wait for my response. Ava took a step back, finally giving me space to breathe, and gently guided me by the small of my back toward a massive, plush, cream-colored curved sofa in the center of the living room. My legs were shaking so badly I practically collapsed onto the cushions. "Sit," she instructed softly. "You are pale. Have you eaten anything this morning?" I shook my head numbly. I couldn't keep anything down. I've been too nauseous. And terrified of you. A flicker of genuine regret flashed across Ava's sharp features, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, masked by her usual stoic CEO facade. She walked over to a sleek intercom on her desk and pressed a silver button. "Maria, bring the breakfast tray to the main lounge. Now." Within 60 seconds, the private elevator doors chimed, and an older beta woman in a pristine uniform hurried out, pushing a silver cart laden with fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, and the smell of freshly squeezed orange juice. She arranged the food on the glass coffee table in front of me with practiced efficiency and disappeared without saying a single word. "Eat," Ava commanded, taking a seat on the armchair opposite me. She crossed her long legs, watching me with predatory intensity. "Your body is working overtime. You need sustenance." I reluctantly picked up a piece of dry toast, taking a tiny, hesitant bite. The silence stretching between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. I chewed slowly, my eyes darting around the magnificent penthouse. It was cold, modern, and utterly lifeless. There were no personal photos, no cozy blankets, nothing that indicated a person actually lived here. It looked like a museum exhibit. "I need to know," I finally whispered, breaking the silence. I set the toast down, wiping my trembling hands on a linen napkin. "Why are you doing this? Truly. You are Ava Sterling. You have more money than God. If you didn't want this baby, you could have easily paid me off, sent me to another country, and made me disappear. Why insist on keeping me here?" Ava leaned back in her chair, her piercing blue eyes locking onto mine. She steepled her fingers together. "'Cause the Sterling bloodline is everything, Olivia. My family has built this empire over 4 generations. We do not throw our children away. And—" She paused, her gaze dropping momentarily to the sapphire ring on my right thumb. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for 8 weeks. You ruined my focus. You haunted my sleep. I gave you that ring for a reason." My breath hitched. My heart did a stupid, traitorous flip in my chest. Before I could formulate a response, the private elevator chimed again. This time, a tall, severe-looking woman with graying hair, wearing a white medical coat over a professional suit, stepped into the penthouse. She was carrying a sleek, metallic medical briefcase. "Ah, Dr. Vance," Ava said, standing up smoothly. "Right on time." Ava turned to me, her expression all business once again. "This is Dr. Vance, the head of obstetrics at Sterling Memorial Hospital and my personal physician. She is here to confirm the pregnancy and ensure that you and the pup are healthy." Panic flared in my chest again. "Wait, right now?" "Here in the living room. The penthouse is fully equipped with a private medical wing down the hall," Dr. Vance said, her voice calm and soothing, revealing her beta nature. "It will only take a few moments, Miss Hayes. Please come with me." I looked at Ava, a silent plea in my eyes, feeling completely overwhelmed by the speed at which my life was being hijacked. Ava simply held out her hand to me. Reluctantly, feeling like I had absolutely no other choice, I placed my hand in hers. Her long fingers wrapped around mine, warm and solid. She led me down a wide, art-lined hallway into a sterile, brightly lit room that looked exactly like a high-end clinic. I laid down on the plush examination table, pulling up the hem of my sweater with shaking hands. Cool gel hit my flat stomach, making me shiver. Dr. Vance dimmed the lights and turned on a massive, high-definition monitor mounted on the wall. She moved the wand over my stomach. The silence in the room was deafening. Ava stood right beside my head, her hand resting heavily and protectively on my shoulder. Suddenly, a rhythmic, rapid whoosh-whoosh-whoosh filled the room. It was the heartbeat. Loud, strong, and impossibly fast. I gasped, my hands flying to cover my mouth. Tears instantly spilled down my cheeks, but this time they weren't from fear. It was real. There was a tiny, fragile life growing inside of me. I looked up at the screen, seeing the clear, distinct shape of the fetus. I felt Ava's hand tighten convulsively on my shoulder. I glanced up at her. Cold, untouchable Billionaire Alpha was completely frozen. Her icy blue eyes were wide, fixated on the monitor. For a split second, the mask slipped entirely. I saw sheer, unadulterated awe and fierce biological pride warring on her face. Her chest heaved as she listened to the sound of her pup's heartbeat. "A strong, perfectly healthy heartbeat," Dr. Vance smiled, printing out a strip of high-definition photos. "Measuring exactly 8 weeks and 3 days. Everything looks perfect, Ms. Sterling." Dr. Vance wiped the gel off my stomach and handed me the photos. As she packed up her briefcase to leave, Ava finally found her voice. It was thick, rough, and trembling with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "Thank you, doctor. I will see you to the elevator." Ava walked the doctor out, leaving me alone in the dim room, staring at the glossy photos in my hands. The reality of my situation was crashing down on me. I was having a baby. Ava Sterling's baby. A few minutes later, the heavy door opened and Ava stepped back into the room. The vulnerability was completely gone from her face, replaced by a terrifying, determined resolve. She walked over to me, stopping right at the edge of the examination table. "Get dressed, Olivia," Ava said, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "What happens now?" I asked quietly, pulling my sweater down and sitting up. Ava looked down at me, her icy eyes blazing with a possessive fire that made my breath catch. Now, I call my public relations team. A Sterling does not have a child out of wedlock, and the media will not be permitted to call my heir a bastard. The press conference announcing our engagement is scheduled for noon. My world completely stopped spinning. Our what? I whispered, the blood draining from my face. Ava leaned down, bracing her hands on either side of me, trapping me once again. Our engagement. You are going to be my wife, Olivia. And the whole world is going to know that you belong to me. End of part 3. Part 4. Our engagement, Ava's words echoed in the sterile medical room, heavy and absolute. You are going to be my wife, Olivia. And the whole world is going to know that you belong to me. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the room was the harsh, ragged intake of my own breath. I stared up at the towering, devastatingly beautiful Alpha leaning over me, searching her icy blue eyes for any sign that this was a sick, twisted joke. But Ava Sterling did not make jokes. Her expression was carved from solid marble, radiating an unyielding, terrifying certainty. Have you completely lost your mind? I finally choked out, shoving my hands forcefully against her chest. This time, she allowed me to push her back half a step, though her dominant presence still swallowed the room. Marriage? Ava, I don't even know your middle name. We spent one single night together, a night I barely remember because of my cycle fever, and now you want to legally bind me to you for the rest of my life? No. Absolutely not. My middle name is Victoria, Ava replied, her tone infuriatingly calm, brushing an invisible speck of dust off her immaculate navy suit lapel. And your refusal is not an option. It is my life, I yelled, sliding off the examination table. My legs were trembling, but the sheer, blinding panic of being trapped fueled my defiance. You can't buy me. You can't force me to stand in front of a priest and say vows to a stranger just to protect your company's stock prices. Ava's jaw clenched tight. In a flash of terrifying alpha speed, she closed the distance between us, her large hands gripping my upper arms. She didn't squeeze hard enough to bruise, but the sheer strength in her long fingers completely immobilized me. Listen to me very carefully, little Omega, because I am only going to explain this once, Ava said, her voice dropping into that dark, rumbling register that made my inner wolf whimper in immediate submission. My wealth and my surname put a massive target on my back. Paparazzi in this city are bloodthirsty. If word gets out that I impregnated an unknown, destitute Omega from the slums, they will tear you apart. They will camp outside your building, they will hack your phone, they will dig into every mistake you have ever made, and they will hound you until you break. I swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. I knew the tabloids were vicious, but hearing her lay it out so brutally made it terrifyingly real. Ava's icy eyes softened just a fraction, her thumbs rubbing slow, soothing circles into the fabric of my cardigan. But if you walk out there today as my fiancé, as the future Mrs. Sterling, you become untouchable. The Sterling name is an impenetrable shield. No reporter will dare breathe a wrong word about you because they know I will destroy their entire publication if they do. I am doing this to protect you, Olivia. And to protect our pup. I looked down at my flat stomach, then back up into Ava's intense gaze. She wasn't just being a controlling billionaire. Her alpha instincts were screaming at her to build a fortress around her pregnant mate. It was biology mixed with terrifying, limitless wealth. A press conference? I whispered, my voice breaking. Today? Ava, look at me. I'm wearing a faded thrift store sweater and my hair is a wet, frizzy mess from the rain. I can't go on national television like this. A small, triumphant smirk touched the corner of Ava's lips. She knew she had one. She released my arms and took a step back, pulling her sleek cell phone from her inside pocket. That is already being handled, Ava said smoothly, typing out a rapid message. My personal styling team arrived in the penthouse 10 minutes ago. You have exactly 1 hour to prepare. The next 60 minutes were a whirlwind of sheer, dizzying chaos. I was ushered out of the medical wing and into Ava's master bedroom, a sprawling, minimalist sanctuary of dark silk, charcoal gray walls, and massive windows. A team of 4 betas and 1 fiercely energetic Omega descended upon me like a military unit. They stripped away my damp clothes, wrapping me in a plush, heated robe that smelled faintly of Ava's crushed pine and dark chocolate scent. My hair was blown out into sleek, voluminous waves that cascaded down my back. A makeup artist flawlessly airbrushed my skin, hiding the dark circles under my terrified eyes and accentuating my cheekbones until I looked like a completely different person. Finally, they brought out the dress. It was a custom long-sleeved silk midi dress in a rich, creamy ivory. Clung perfectly to my curves, elegant and modest, yet incredibly expensive. A pair of nude, designer stilettos were slipped onto my feet. When they spun me around to face the full-length floor mirror, I literally gasped. The woman staring back at me didn't look like Olivia Hayes, the struggling graphic designer who ate instant ramen for dinner. She looked like a billionaire's perfect, pristine Omega bride. "Leave us," a deep voice commanded from the doorway. The styling team immediately bowed their heads and scurried out of the room, closing the heavy oak double doors behind them. I turned around. Ava was standing there, leaning casually against the doorframe. She had changed into a fresh, pitch-black tailored suit with a crisp white silk shirt buttoned halfway down, exposing the delicate, strong line of her collarbone. She looked like a dark, predatory goddess, and the way her icy blue eyes slowly raked up and down my body made a heavy, pooling heat gather in my lower stomach. She walked slowly toward me, stopping just inches away. She didn't say a word about how I looked, but her pupils were blown wide, entirely eclipsed by the black of her desire. The alpha in her was incredibly pleased with what she saw. Ava reached out, gently taking my right hand. She ran her thumb over the heavy silver band and the massive square-cut sapphire resting on my thumb. "It belonged to my grandmother," Ava murmured, her voice a rough whisper in the quiet room. "The matriarch of the Sterling family. I carried it with me for 5 years, waiting for the right moment. When I slipped it onto your hand in that hotel room, I didn't do it by accident, Olivia. My wolf chose you that night. You were already my fiancé. Today, we are simply making it official." My breath hitched. I stared down at the ring, the immense weight of its history suddenly crashing down on me. I wasn't just wearing an expensive piece of jewelry. I was wearing the Sterling family legacy. "It's time," Ava said softly, dropping my hand and instead wrapping her strong arm firmly around my waist. She pulled my side flush against her hip, anchoring me to her. "Do not let go of me. Keep your chin up. And let me do all the talking." We took the private elevator all the way down to the sub-level of the tower, where the massive Sterling Enterprises media room was located. The moment the steel doors opened, the deafening roar of 100 shouting reporters hit me like a physical wall. The room was packed to the brim with cameras, microphones, and glaring, blinding lights. The scent of hundreds of excited, aggressive alphas and betas in the press corps was overwhelming. I instinctively shrank back, a tiny, distressed whine escaping my throat. Instantly, Ava's grip on my waist tightened to an iron clamp. She released a heavy, concentrated wave of her dominant alpha pheromones. It rolled over me like a protective, invisible shield, warning every single person in that room to back off. The effect was immediate. The shouting died down to a manageable hum as the reporters recognized the lethal warning in their Billionaire CEO's scent. Ava guided me up the few steps to the sleek podium, her arm never leaving my waist. The flashbulbs were blinding, popping in rapid succession. I kept my eyes fixed on the microphones, trying to remember how to breathe. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ava began, her voice booming smoothly through the sound system, utterly calm and commanding. "I have called this emergency press conference to share some extraordinary personal news. For the past few months, I have been quietly courting the woman standing beside me, Miss Olivia Hayes. Today, I am thrilled to announce our official engagement." The room erupted. Dozens of hands shot into the air, journalists screaming their questions over one another. "Miss Sterling." "Over here," a sharp-looking beta woman shouted from the front row. "This is incredibly sudden. What about the long-standing rumors regarding your potential merger and arranged mating with the CEO of Vanguard Industries, Alpha Victoria Mercer? Is this sudden engagement a cover-up for a corporate fallout?" My heart skipped a beat. Arranged mating? Victoria Mercer? Ava had never mentioned any of this. Ava's face turned instantly to stone. Her icy eyes narrowed at the reporter. "My professional acquisitions have nothing to do with my personal life. Victoria Mercer is a business associate, nothing more. I have found my Omega, and she is the only woman who will ever wear the Sterling ring." "Miss Hayes," a ruthless-looking alpha reporter yelled from the back, ignoring Ava's warning glare. "You have no background in high society. Are the rumors true? Are you already pregnant with the Sterling heir to secure the family wealth?" I completely froze. My blood ran cold. How could they possibly know that? The ultrasound was only 2 hours ago. Ava's entire body tensed violently. A lethal, terrifying growl actually vibrated through the microphones, making half the room physically recoil in fear. She didn't answer the reporter. Instead, Ava turned fully toward me in front of the flashing cameras. She reached up, her long fingers threading through my freshly styled hair, gently cupping the back of my neck. Before I could process what was happening, Ava dipped her head and captured my lips in a deep, bruising, incredibly possessive kiss. My eyes fluttered shut. Kiss was meant for the cameras, a show of absolute dominance and ownership, but the way her soft lips moved against mine, the way she tasted of mint and dark chocolate, sent a completely genuine, electrifying jolt straight down my spine. My hands instinctively fluttered up to grip the lapels of her suit jacket, holding on for dear life. When she finally pulled away, leaving me dizzy and breathless, she leaned her forehead against mine, shielding my face from the cameras. "Do not listen to them," Ava whispered fiercely against my lips, meant only for my ears. "You are safe. I have you." She turned us around, ignoring the screaming journalists, and began to forcefully guide me off the stage and back toward the safety of the private elevator. But just as the metal doors slid open to receive us, my cell phone, tucked away in the hidden pocket of my ivory dress, buzzed sharply against my thigh. Once we were inside the elevator and the doors closed, cutting off the chaotic roar of the press, I pulled the phone out with shaking hands. It was a text message from an unknown number. My blood turned completely to ice as I read the words glowing on the screen. "Ava destroys everything she touches. I was her Omega before you. If you want to keep that baby alive, meet me at the old pier at midnight. Tell her nothing." End of Part 4. Part 5. The glowing screen of my phone felt like a block of solid ice burning through the palm of my hand. Text message glared at me, the harsh white letters mocking the temporary sense of safety I had just found in Ava's arms. "Ava destroys everything she touches. I was her Omega before you. If you want to keep that baby alive, meet me at the old pier at midnight. Tell her nothing." My breath hitched violently in my throat. I desperately slammed my thumb against the power button, plunging the screen into darkness and shoving the device deep into the hidden pocket of my ivory silk dress just as the private elevator jolted into motion. "Olivia?" Ava's deep, velvety voice broke through the rushing sound of blood in my ears. Her large hand, which had been resting protectively on the small of my back, slid upward to gently cup my jaw. She gently turned my face toward hers. The icy blue of her eyes was sharp, scanning my pale features with predatory concern. Her brow furrowed, and a low, soothing rumble vibrated in her chest as her alpha instincts flared at my sudden spike in distress. "You're shaking," Ava murmured, her thumb stroking my cheekbone. The intoxicating scent of crushed pine and dark chocolate rolled off her in heavy waves, meant to calm me. "Did one of those vultures say something else to you? I swear I will have their press credentials revoked and their publications bankrupted by nightfall." "No," I blurted out, perhaps a little too quickly. I forced myself to take a deep, steadying breath, plastering a fragile smile onto my face. I couldn't let her know about the text. If Ava was truly dangerous, telling her would put this stranger and my baby at risk. No, it's not that. The flashing lights. The screaming. It was so overwhelming. I've never experienced anything like that in my life, Ava. It wasn't entirely a lie. Press conference had been terrifying. Ava's tense posture relaxed slightly, the rigid line of her shoulders dropping. She pulled me flush against her side, tucking my head securely under her chin as the elevator shot upwards toward the penthouse. "You did perfectly," she whispered into my hair, pressing a firm, lingering kiss to the crown of my head. "I know it was a shock, but it was necessary. You are shielded now. Nobody will dare touch you. I promise you, little Omega, you are safe in my territory." Her words, meant to be a comforting vow, suddenly felt like a heavy, velvet trap. "Ava destroys everything she touches." The anonymous warning echoed loudly in my mind, perfectly in sync with the rapid, frantic beating of my heart. When the elevator doors finally chimed and slid open to the expansive, silent penthouse, Ava immediately summoned her staff. Within minutes, I was guided back to the master bedroom, helped out of the heavy designer dress, and dressed in a pair of soft, luxurious silk pajamas. "I have a mandatory emergency board meeting to deal with the fallout of the announcement and to finalize the Vanguard Industries merger," Ava said, standing in the doorway of the bedroom. She had shed her suit jacket, the crisp white shirt rolling up to her elbows, revealing lean, corded muscles and a jagged silver scar running down her left forearm that I hadn't noticed before. "I will be working in my downstairs office until late. I have stationed 2 beta guards at the elevator and 1 at the fire exit. Rest, Olivia. Drink water. I will check on you before I sleep." I simply nodded, pulling the heavy down comforter up to my chin. "Okay. Good luck with your meeting." Ava lingered for a moment, her icy blue eyes dark with an unspoken intensity, before she finally turned and closed the heavy oak doors, locking me inside my luxurious gilded cage. For the next 5 hours, I paced the length of the massive bedroom like a trapped wild animal. My mind was a chaotic battleground. On one hand, Ava's fiercely protective actions and the undeniable biological pull of my Omega wolf toward her made me want to trust her blindly. But on the other hand, the reality of my situation was terrifying. I was completely isolated. She had bought my apartment, controlled my medical care, and announced our marriage to the world without my consent. If there was even a fraction of a percent of a chance that Ava was a threat to my unborn pup, I had to know the truth. I glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand. 11:15 p.m. It was now or never. I moved quietly to the massive walk-in closet, stripping off the silk pajamas. I dug through the bags of my own belongings that Ava's security team had aggressively packed and brought from my apartment. I pulled on a pair of dark jeans, a black long-sleeved shirt, and my scuffed, rubber-soled black boots. From Ava's side of the closet, I grabbed a massive, black-hooded sweatshirt. Drowned my frame, but more importantly, it was completely saturated in her rich, dominant alpha scent. It would act as the perfect camouflage. I slipped my phone into my pocket and cracked the bedroom door open. Penthouse was deathly quiet, bathed in the dim blue glow of the Seattle city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I crept down the mahogany hallway, my heart in my throat. I couldn't use the main private elevator. The guards were stationed right outside. But during my pacing earlier, I had noticed a small, unmarked door near the industrial kitchen, the service elevator used for catering and cleaning staff. I slipped into the kitchen, freezing as I heard a faint murmuring. Maria, the beta housekeeper, was wiping down the granite countertops, listening to a podcast. I pulled Ava's massive hood over my head, letting the thick alpha scent billow around me. I took a deep breath, channeled every ounce of confidence I could fake, and stepped out. I walked swiftly past the kitchen island, keeping my head down. Maria glanced up, her eyes widening slightly, but the overwhelming scent of her billionaire alpha boss rolling off the oversized hoodie made her immediately lower her gaze in instinctual respect. She didn't say a word as I bypassed her, swiped a spare maintenance keycard I spotted on the counter, and slipped into the service elevator. The descent was agonizingly slow. When the doors finally opened on the ground floor loading dock, the freezing, damp Seattle air hit me like a slap to the face. I pulled the hood tighter and sprinted out into the rainy night, sticking to the dark alleyways to avoid the paparazzi that were likely still swarming the main entrance. The old pier was located on the gritty edge of the industrial district, a decaying stretch of wooden planks jutting out into the black, churning waters of the Puget Sound. The fog was thick, rolling off the water in heavy waves, making it impossible to see more than 10 feet ahead. I arrived at exactly midnight, my boots squelching on the rotting wood. The rhythmic crashing of the waves against the pylons sounded like a ticking clock. I shivered, wrapping my arms protectively around my stomach. "Hello," I called out, my voice swallowed by the wind and the fog. "I'm here. You texted me." "Nothing." I took a few steps forward, the rusted metal of a shipping container looming to my left. "Please. If you know something about Ava, if my baby is in danger, please tell me." "You actually came." I spun around, gasping. Stepping out from the thick fog behind the shipping container was a woman. She was petite, her frame frail and trembling beneath a thin trench coat. Her hair was a messy tangle of blonde, plastered to her pale face by the relentless rain. But it was her eyes that made my blood run cold. They were wide, hollow, and haunted, the eyes of an Omega whose spirit had been completely and utterly broken. "Who are you?" I whispered, taking a cautious step back. "You said you were her Omega." The woman let out a dry, humorless laugh that sounded more like a sob. She stepped into the dim, flickering yellow light of a broken street lamp. "My name is Elena. 3 years ago I was exactly where you are, swept off my feet by Ava Sterling. Drowned in her wealth, suffocated by her dominant protection, and blinded by that stupid, heavy ring." She raised her right hand. My breath caught in my throat. On her thumb, gleaming in the dull light, was an exact replica of the massive, square-cut sapphire ring I was currently wearing. "But there's only one," I stammered, shaking my head in denial. "Ava said there was only one in the world. It was her grandmother's." "Ava is a brilliant, beautiful, terrifying liar," Elena spat, taking a step toward me, her scent a bitter, sour wave of pure distress. "She collects Omegas, Olivia. She finds us, she marks us, she isolates us until we have absolutely nothing left but her. And the moment we fail to give her what she truly wants, she disposes of us." "What does she want?" I demanded, my hands instinctively covering my flat stomach. Elena's hollow eyes dropped to my abdomen. A look of profound, agonizing grief twisted her features. "An heir. A pure-blooded alpha heir to secure her legacy. But I couldn't give it to her. I miscarried at 5 months. Elena's voice cracked, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "The day I lost the baby, the warmth disappeared. Protection vanished. She threw me out onto the street with nothing, effectively erasing me from existence. If your baby turns out to be a beta or an omega, she will do the exact same thing to you." Tears streamed down my face. I shook my head, unable to process the sheer cruelty of her words. The Ava who had held my hand during the ultrasound, the Ava whose eyes had filled with awe at the sound of the heartbeat, could she really be this monster? "I don't believe you," I cried, taking another step back toward the edge of the pier. "She's protecting me. She announced our engagement to the entire world. To trap you," Elena screamed, lunging forward and grabbing my forearms with surprising, desperate strength. Her manic eyes bored into mine. "You have to run, Olivia. If you stay with her, she will drain the life from you. She's already arranging the Vanguard merger to replace you when you fail." Suddenly, the piercing shriek of tires skidding on wet asphalt shattered the night. Blinding, high-beam headlights cut through the thick fog, pinning us both like deer in the headlights. A massive, black-armored SUV slid to a violent halt right at the entrance of the pier, blocking the only exit. Elena gasped, her grip on my arms turning into pure terror. She released me, taking a stumbling step backward. "No. No, she found us. She tracked your phone. Before I could even process what was happening, the doors of the SUV flew open. 3 massive security guards piled out, but my eyes were locked on the driver's side. Ava Sterling stepped out into the freezing rain. She wasn't wearing a suit anymore. She was dressed in all black, and she looked absolutely lethal. Her icy blue eyes locked onto me through the rain, blazing with a terrifying, unhinged fury that I had never seen before. Her jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. The sheer, crushing weight of her enraged alpha pheromones hit me from 50 feet away, so suffocatingly powerful that my knees instantly gave out, sending me crashing to the wet wooden planks. Ava didn't even look at Elena. Her murderous gaze was entirely fixed on me as she began to stalk down the pier, her boots thudding against the wood like the heavy, rhythmic beat of an execution drum. "Olivia!" Ava's voice roared over the crashing waves, a sound of pure, possessive rage that shook the very air in my lungs. "What have you done?" End of Part 5. Part 6. The sheer, crushing weight of Ava's enraged alpha pheromones hit me from 50 feet away. It was so suffocatingly powerful, so thick with primal, possessive fury, that my knees instantly gave out, sending me crashing down onto the wet, rotting wooden planks of the pier. I gasped for air, clutching my chest, completely paralyzed by the biological command to submit. Ava didn't even look at Elena. Her murderous gaze was entirely fixed on me as she stalked down the pier, her heavy black boots thudding against the wood like the rhythmic beat of an execution drum. The freezing rain plastered her dark hair to her sharp jawline, and the muscles in her neck were corded tightly. She looked like a goddess of war, and she had come specifically for me. "Olivia!" Ava's voice roared over the crashing waves, a sound of pure, possessive rage that shook the very air in my lungs. "What have you done?" Before I could even formulate a single word of defense, Ava was suddenly there. She dropped to her knees on the filthy, wet wood right in front of me, completely ignoring the puddles soaking through her expensive dark trousers. Her large, shaking hands grabbed my shoulders, hauling me up from the ground and pulling me violently against her chest. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, her voice cracking, the terrifying roar suddenly replaced by a frantic, breathless panic. Her hands roamed rapidly over my arms, my back, and finally settled protectively over my stomach. "Did she touch you?" "Tell me if she touched you, Olivia, so I can rip her arms off." I'm okay," I stammered, my teeth chattering uncontrollably from the freezing rain and the adrenaline crashing through my system. "Ava, I'm sorry, Don't move," Ava commanded, her icy blue eyes flashing with a dangerous golden alpha light. She shrugged off her heavy, water-resistant black trench coat and wrapped it tightly around my trembling shoulders, pulling me impossibly closer to her radiating body heat. "Let me go," a shrill voice screamed behind us. I turned my head slightly, peering over Ava's broad shoulder. 2 of the massive security guards had pinned Elena against the rusted shipping container. She was thrashing wildly, her previous frail, victimized demeanor completely vanishing, replaced by vicious, feral anger. Ava slowly stood up, keeping me tucked securely behind her. The frantic, terrified alpha who had just checked every inch of my body disappeared. The ruthless, untouchable billionaire CEO returned in full force. She took a slow, deliberate step toward the struggling woman. "You have a lot of nerve, Margaret," Ava said, her voice dropping to a lethal, deadly whisper that cut right through the howling wind. My brow furrowed in utter confusion. "Margaret," I whispered from behind her. "She told me her name was Elena. She said she was your former Omega." A dark, humorless chuckle escaped Ava's lips. She reached out, her lightning-fast reflexes grabbing the woman's right wrist. With one brutal, agonizing twist, she yanked the ring off the woman's thumb. Margaret screamed in pain. Ava held the ring up in the flickering yellow light of the street lamp. "My former Omega?" Ava sneered, pure disgust dripping from every syllable. "This woman is an unpresented beta. Her name is Margaret Vance. She is a low-level corporate espionage operative hired by Vanguard Industries. And this..." Ava placed the ring on the metal railing of the pier. She lifted her heavy boot and brought it down with a sickening crunch. The metal flattened instantly, and the massive sapphire shattered into a dozen cloudy, cheap pieces of colored glass. A pathetic, cheap replica, Ava finished, her icy eyes burning into Margaret's pale face. Did Victoria Mercer really think I wouldn't track my own fiancé's phone? Did she really think I wouldn't smell a rat the moment my security feed showed you leaving the penthouse? Tell me, Margaret, what was the objective? Stress my pregnant Omega out enough to induce a miscarriage so the Vanguard merger would be forced back on the table? My stomach bottomed out. The world tilted dangerously on its axis. They weren't trying to warn me. They were trying to kill my baby. A horrifying, choked sob ripped from my throat. My knees buckled again as the terrifying realization crashed over me. I had walked right into a trap. I had put the tiny, fragile life inside me in absolute, undeniable danger because I had doubted the one woman who was actually trying to protect me. Ava heard my sob. The interrogation was instantly over. Put her in the trunk of the second SUV, Ava ordered her guards, her voice devoid of any human emotion. Take her to the subterranean holding cells at the corporate security center. I want a full, written confession of Vanguard's involvement by sunrise, or I will let my legal team dismantle her entire life piece by piece. The guards nodded, dragging the screaming, thrashing operative away into the dark fog. Ava turned back to me. The murderous fury in her eyes vanished the moment she saw the tears streaming down my face. She didn't say another word. She simply stepped forward, scooped me up into her strong arms as easily as if I weighed absolutely nothing, and carried me toward the idling armored SUV. I buried my face in the crook of her neck, my hands clutching desperately at the lapels of her damp shirt. The scent of her pine, chocolate, and ozone was no longer suffocating or intimidating. It was a lifeline. I inhaled it greedily, my Omega wolf weeping in pure relief and shame. The ride back to the Sterling Tower was completely silent. Ava sat in the spacious back seat of the SUV with me, refusing to let me go. She held me entirely in her lap, the heavy privacy partition raised so the driver couldn't see or hear us. The heater was blasting, but the real warmth came from the thick, vibrating hum of her alpha purr. She was actively releasing soothing, heavy pheromones, wrapping me in a biological blanket of safety to lower my spiked heart rate. I kept my face hidden against her collarbone, too ashamed to look her in the eyes. I had been so stupid. So reckless. When we finally reached the penthouse, the sun was just beginning to turn the dark Seattle sky into a bruised, stormy purple. Ava carried me straight past the panicked, bowing staff and directly into the master bathroom. It was a sprawling oasis of white marble and gold fixtures. She set me down gently on the edge of the massive soaking tub and turned on the hot water. Only then did she step back and cross her arms over her chest, looking down at me. "Strip," she commanded quietly. "You are freezing, and you are covered in the toxic scent of that pier. Get in the water." I didn't argue. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage the buttons of the oversized hoodie I had stolen from her closet. I let the wet clothes fall to the marble floor and stepped into the steaming, scented water. The heat instantly began to melt the ice in my bones. Ava didn't leave. She grabbed a thick, heated towel, rolled up her wet sleeves, and knelt beside the tub. For a long time, the only sound was the splashing of the water as she gently washed the grime from my shoulders and arms. Her touch was excruciatingly tender, a stark contrast to the absolute violence she had displayed at the pier. "Why didn't you ask me?" Ava finally spoke, her voice thick and gravelly in the echoing bathroom. Her icy blue eyes lifted to meet mine, swirling with a mixture of pain, frustration, and undeniable possessiveness. "Why did you sneak out into the freezing rain in the middle of the night to meet a stranger instead of simply asking me for the truth?" Tears instantly welled in my eyes again. "I was terrified, Ava," I whispered, my voice breaking. I pulled my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible in the massive tub. "You hijacked my entire life in 12 hours. You took my home, my choices, and you announced to the world that I belonged to you. When I got that text, when she said you threw her away because she miscarried, it fed every single one of my worst fears. I thought you only wanted me as an incubator. Ava's jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in her cheek. She closed her eyes, letting out a long, ragged breath that sounded almost like a growl of agony. "Look at me, Olivia," she demanded softly. I slowly lifted my tear-stained face. Ava reached into the water, her large hands gently cupping my cheeks. Her thumbs brushed away the tears mixing with the bathwater. "I have built an empire that spans the globe," Ava said, her voice fiercely intense, burning with a sincerity that made my heart ache. "I have destroyed rivals, manipulated markets, and ruthlessly crushed anyone who stood in my way. I am not a good person, Olivia. I have never claimed to be. But the one thing I am not and will never be is a monster to my own family." She leaned in closer, the intoxicating, dominant scent of her alpha nature wrapping tightly around my fragile senses. "I did not claim you just for an heir," Ava confessed, the raw vulnerability in her tone completely shocking me. "I claimed you because for 2 months I haven't been able to close my eyes without seeing your face. I claimed you because my wolf recognized yours the second you collided with me in that hallway. The baby is a miracle. A beautiful, unexpected miracle that gave me the excuse I needed to tear this city apart and bring you home." My breath hitched. My heart fluttered wildly against my ribs. "Ava." "You are my mate, Olivia," Ava fiercely whispered, her thumbs stroking my jawline. "Whether this pup is an alpha, a beta, or a beautiful little omega just like you, they will rule my empire one day. And you will rule me. But you must never, ever put yourself in danger like that again." If I had been even 1 minute later to that pier, her voice broke. The untouchable billionaire actually shuddered at the thought. I reached up, my wet hands covering hers where they rested against my cheeks. The heavy, authentic sapphire ring on my thumb pressed against her skin. "I won't," I promised, my voice trembling with newfound conviction. "I won't run again. I promise." Ava let out a ragged breath. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against mine. "Good," she murmured, her icy eyes dropping to my lips. "Because you are mine, Olivia. And it is time you truly understood what that means." End of Part 6. Part 7. Because you are mine, Olivia. And it is time you truly understood what that means. Ava's words hung in the steamy, echoing air of the marble bathroom, vibrating with a heavy, ancient truth that completely bypassed my logical brain and spoke directly to my Omega instincts. She didn't kiss me with the brutal, dominating force she had used in front of the flashing cameras. Instead, Ava leaned in with agonizing slowness. Her lips brushed against mine, a feather-light touch that sent a violent electric shockwave straight down my spine. I gasped, my hands instantly gripping her wet forearms to steady myself as the world around me tilted. It was a kiss of absolute reverence. A vow. She tasted of rain, expensive mint, and the dark, intoxicating richness of her alpha pheromones. She poured every ounce of her protective devotion into that single lingering touch, asking for my complete surrender not through force but through an overwhelming, undeniable love. When she finally pulled away, my lips were tingling and I was entirely breathless. Ava's icy blue eyes were entirely dilated, the dark pupils eclipsing the color, completely driven by her wolf. Without breaking eye contact, she reached for the massive, heated towel she had laid out. With careful, almost painfully gentle movements, she helped me stand from the warm bathwater. She wrapped the thick, plush cotton tightly around my trembling shoulders, completely enveloping me in her scent. She dried my hair, her long, elegant fingers massaging my scalp in a way that made a soft, involuntary purr build in the back of my throat. Ava paused, her hands freezing in my damp hair. She let out a ragged breath, the sound of my Omega purr hitting her like a physical blow. A look of sheer, biological triumph washed over her sharp features. "I could listen to that sound for the rest of my life," she murmured, her voice thick and raspy. She didn't let me put the oversized, damp hoodie back on. Instead, she walked into the adjoining massive closet and returned with a dark navy silk button-down shirt. Her shirt. She slipped it over my shoulders, carefully buttoning it up halfway. The silk was impossibly soft against my skin, and the scent of crushed pine and dark chocolate was so concentrated in the fabric that it felt like an invisible protective armor. "Come," Ava whispered, scooping me up into her strong arms once again. She carried me into the sprawling, dimly lit master bedroom. The storm raged on outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle rain lashing against the reinforced glass, but inside this room I had never felt safer. Ava laid me down in the center of the massive, king-sized bed, pulling the heavy down comforter up to my chin. She quickly changed into a pair of dry, dark sweatpants and a simple black t-shirt. When she slid into the bed beside me, the mattress dipped under her solid weight. I instinctively gravitated toward her heat. Ava didn't hesitate. She wrapped her strong arms around me, pulling my back flush against her chest, tangling her long legs with mine. She tucked her face into the crook of my neck, right over my scent gland. For a long time, we just lay there in the dark. The steady, powerful rhythm of her heartbeat thudded against my spine, perfectly in sync with the tiny, rapid flutter of the life growing inside me. "Ava," I whispered into the quiet darkness. "I am here, little Omega," she rumbled softly against my skin. "I'm right here. What happens now? With Vanguard? With Victoria Mercer?" Questions had been gnawing at the edge of my mind, the terrifying reality of the billionaire war I had just been dragged into. I felt Ava's jaw clench against my neck. Her grip on my waist tightened fractionally. "You let me worry about Victoria Mercer. By the time the sun rises, Vanguard Industries will be bleeding from a dozen different financial arteries. Nobody threatens my family and walks away intact. But Margaret said she wanted the merger." "Victoria Mercer is a power-hungry traditionalist alpha," Ava interrupted, her voice turning cold with deep-seated hatred. "She believes our two empires should unite through an arranged mating. When I publicly announced our engagement today, I effectively killed her grand vision. She sent her operative to eliminate the obstacle, our pup, hoping it would break our bond and force me back to the negotiating table." I shivered, pressing closer to Ava's warmth. "She sounds terrifying." "She is a mosquito," Ava scoffed, a dark, arrogant certainty in her tone. "And I am going to swat her. Now sleep, Olivia. Your body has endured too much trauma tonight. Let me guard you." Ava released a heavy, concentrated wave of soothing alpha pheromones. It washed over my exhausted senses like a strong sedative. Between the heat of her body, the rhythmic sound of her heartbeat, and the safety of her scent, my eyes grew impossibly heavy. For the first time in 2 agonizing months, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When I finally woke, the bedroom was bathed in the soft, gray light of mid-morning. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, clear view of the Seattle skyline. I stretched, my muscles still aching slightly from the cold of the pier, but my mind felt incredibly clear. I rolled over. The space beside me was empty, but the sheets were still warm and smelled heavily of Ava. I sat up, pulling the massive silk shirt down over my thighs, and padded barefoot out of the bedroom. Penthouse was quiet, save for the faint, rich smell of roasted coffee. I followed the scent into the massive, open-concept kitchen. Maria, the beta housekeeper, was arranging a beautiful spread of fresh fruit, warm pastries, and eggs on the marble island. When she saw me, her eyes immediately darted to the dark silk shirt I was wearing, Ava's shirt. A knowing, respectful smile touched her lips. "Good morning, Miss Hayes," Maria said warmly. "Miss Sterling instructed me to ensure you ate a full breakfast the moment you woke up. She is currently in her study on a transatlantic conference call, but she requested you join her whenever you are ready." "Thank you, Maria," I smiled shyly, taking a seat at the island. I ate quickly, my appetite returning with a vengeance now that the crushing weight of my anxiety had lifted. Once I finished, I took a deep breath, smoothing down the hem of the silk shirt, and made my way down the long, art-lined hallway toward the heavy double doors of Ava's study. The doors were slightly ajar. I paused, hearing the terrifying, ruthless edge of Ava's corporate voice filtering into the hallway. "I don't care if their stocks plummet by 40%, Ava snapped, her voice like cracking ice. "I want you to aggressively short every single Vanguard holding on the European market. Pull our supply chain contracts. Bleed them dry, Marcus. I want Victoria Mercer panicking before lunch." I pushed the door open softly. The study was a sprawling, intimidating room filled with dark mahogany bookshelves and a massive, custom-built desk. Ava was standing by the window, a phone pressed to her ear, looking out over the city. She was dressed impeccably in a sharp, tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair swept back flawlessly. She turned around, sensing my presence instantly. Transformation was absolute whiplash. The lethal, bloodthirsty billionaire CEO vanished the second her icy blue eyes landed on me. The hard lines of her face melted into absolute, terrifyingly soft devotion. "Execute the trades. Call me when it's done," Ava commanded into the phone, hanging up without waiting for a response. She tossed the device onto her desk and immediately crossed the room toward me. "You're awake," she murmured, stopping just inches in front of me. She reached out, her large hands gently cupping my waist. "How do you feel? Any nausea? Any pain?" "I feel safe," I admitted quietly, looking up into her eyes. It was the absolute truth. A breathtaking smile broke across Ava's face, softening her sharp features and making her look impossibly beautiful. "Good. Because tonight, the rest of the world needs to see exactly how safe and untouchable you are." My brow furrowed. "Tonight?" Ava guided me toward one of the plush leather armchairs, pulling me down so that I was sitting securely on her lap. I gasped, blushing furiously, but she just chuckled, wrapping her arms securely around my waist and resting her chin on my shoulder. "Tonight is the annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala," Ava explained, her voice vibrating against my collarbone. "It is the largest high society event of the year. Every major CEO, politician, and media outlet will be there. We are going to attend together." Panic immediately flared in my chest. "Ava, I can't. I don't know how to act at those things. I'm just a junior graphic designer. What if I say the wrong thing? What if the press corners me again?" "Nobody will corner you," Ava promised fiercely, her hand moving to rest protectively over my flat stomach. "Because I will not leave your side for a single second. Last night, Vanguard tried to strike from the shadows because they thought you were weak and unprotected. Tonight we walk into the light. We show them that the Sterling Alpha has claimed her Omega and that our bloodline is secured. You will wear my family's colors, you will stand by my side, and they will all bow to you." The absolute certainty in her voice left no room for argument. She wasn't just taking me to a party. She was taking me to war, and she was dressing me in armor. 4 hours later, the penthouse was once again swarming with Ava's elite styling team. This time, I didn't fight it. I let them mold me. They dressed me in a breathtaking custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, the official Sterling family color. It hugged my curves elegantly, the heavy fabric pooling around my feet. A delicate diamond-encrusted choker was clasped around my neck, and the ruined sapphire ring had been miraculously repaired and replaced on my right thumb. I stood alone in the master bedroom, staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror. I looked powerful. I looked like an alpha's chosen mate. A soft knock on the door broke my concentration. "Come in," I called out, expecting Ava. Instead, one of the elite beta security guards stepped into the room. He looked highly uncomfortable, holding a sleek silver rectangular box in his gloved hands. "Forgive the intrusion, Ms. Hayes," the guard said, bowing his head slightly. "This package just arrived via a private, heavily vetted diplomatic courier. It bypassed the standard mailroom screening because it was marked with a Level 1 executive override code." I frowned, turning away from the mirror. "From Ava." "No, ma'am," the guard replied, his jaw tightening. "The sender is listed as Alpha Victoria Mercer. My blood instantly ran freezing cold. I walked over on shaky legs and took the silver box from his hands. It was surprisingly light. I dismissed the guard with a nod, waiting until the heavy bedroom door clicked shut before I dared to open it. With trembling fingers, I lifted the silver lid. Inside, resting on a bed of black silk, was a tiny hand-knitted baby blanket. It was beautiful, soft, and innocent, but stitched directly into the center of the delicate fabric in bright blood-red thread was the Vanguard Industries corporate crest. Resting on top of the blanket was a thick, cream-colored cardstock envelope with my name written in sharp, elegant calligraphy. I tore it open. "Dear Olivia," the note read. "Ava is so predictable. She thinks freezing my assets will stop me. She forgets that I don't care about money, I care about legacy. Keep your little pup warm. I am looking forward to finally meeting the Omega who stole my empire. Make sure you look your best tonight. See you at the gala." End of Part 7. Part 8. The heavy cardstock paper trembled violently in my hands. The elegant, sharp calligraphy blurred as tears of pure, unadulterated panic pricked the corners of my eyes. "Keep your little pup warm. I am looking forward to finally meeting the Omega who stole my empire. See you at the gala." I stared down at the tiny baby blanket resting in the silver box, the blood-red Vanguard crest stitched into the center looking like a jagged, bleeding wound. It wasn't just a threat, it was a psychological weapon. Alpha Victoria Mercer had bypassed Ava's billion-dollar security grid with a Level 1 executive override. She was sending a crystal-clear message: "I can reach you wherever you are, even inside Ava's fortress." My immediate biological instinct was to hide. My Omega wolf was whining in terror, urging me to shove the box to the back of the closet, crawl under the heavy down comforter of the bed, and never come out. I didn't want to go to the gala. I didn't want to face the woman who had sent an operative to kill my baby. I actually took a step toward the closet. But then, the memory of last night hit me like a physical blow. The look of absolute devastated betrayal in Ava's icy blue eyes when she found me on that freezing pier. "Why didn't you ask me? Why did you sneak out into the freezing rain instead of simply asking me for the truth?" I had promised her I wouldn't run. I had promised I would trust her. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing the panic down into a tight, hard knot in my chest. I grabbed the silver box, turned on my heel, and marched out of the master bedroom. The heavy mahogany doors of Ava's study were closed this time. I didn't knock. I pushed them open with my shoulder, stepping into the massive room. Ava was seated behind her custom-built desk, reviewing a tablet while her head of security, Marcus, stood at attention. The moment the doors opened, Ava's head snapped up. Her icy eyes immediately cataloged my pale face, the trembling of my hands, and the silver box I was clutching like a shield. "Marcus out," Ava commanded softly. It wasn't a request. The massive beta guard nodded and swiftly exited the room, closing the doors securely behind him. Ava was on her feet in an instant, crossing the expansive room with terrifying, predatory speed. "Olivia? What is it? Your scent is souring with distress." I didn't say a word. I just held out the silver box. Ava's brow furrowed. She reached out and took it from my hands. She looked down at the tiny, innocent-looking knitted blanket, and her eyes locked onto the blood-red Vanguard crest. Then she picked up the cream-colored card and read the note. The shift in the room was instantaneous and catastrophic. The air pressure plummeted so violently my ears popped. The heavy, intoxicating scent of pine and dark chocolate completely vanished, replaced by the suffocating, sharp ozone of a raging thunderstorm. Ava's icy blue eyes bled into a solid, terrifying gold, the pure, unhinged manifestation of her alpha wolf taking absolute control. With a feral, deafening roar that shook the glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows, Ava hurled the silver box across the room. Smashed into the mahogany bookshelves, the metal denting and the baby blanket fluttering to the floor like a dead leaf. I will kill her, Ava snarled, her voice completely unrecognizable, layered with the deep, vibrating growl of her beast. She lunged toward her desk, slamming her fist onto the intercom button. Marcus! Initiate a level Omega lockdown of the entire building. Cancel the motorcade. Nobody goes in or out of this tower. Ava, wait! I cried out, rushing forward and grabbing her forearm. Her muscles were coiled as tight as steel cables. She spun to face me, her chest heaving, the golden alpha eyes blazing with a murderous, overprotective fury. She breached our home, Olivia. She used a diplomatic courier code I haven't been able to revoke yet to send a threat directly to you. You are not leaving this penthouse. You are not going to that gala. I am going to march into that ballroom alone, and I am going to tear Victoria Mercer apart with my bare hands. No! I shouted back, refusing to back down, my own hands tightening on her arm. Ava blinked, the gold in her eyes flickering slightly in sheer shock at my defiance. Olivia! You told me that we were walking into the light, I interrupted, my voice trembling but my gaze locked fiercely onto hers. You told me that Vanguard struck from the shadows because they thought I was weak and unprotected. If we hide here, if you lock me in a tower while you fight my battles, you prove her right. You show her that she can terrify us with a piece of yarn and a piece of paper. She is dangerous, Ava practically begged, her large hands coming up to cup my face, her thumbs stroking my pale cheeks frantically. You don't understand the games these people play. Her pheromones alone could induce panic in you. I cannot risk the pup. I cannot risk you. I am wearing your ring, I whispered fiercely, lifting my right hand to press the heavy sapphire against her chest, right over her racing heart. I am carrying your heir. I am your mate, Ava. I am not a fragile glass doll you can lock in a display case. Let me stand by your side. Protect me while I show her that I am not afraid. For a long, agonizing minute, Ava just stared at me. The golden light in her eyes slowly receded, replaced once again by the piercing, icy blue I had come to love. The murderous rage on her face softened into a look of absolute, breathtaking awe. Her wolf recognized the quiet, unyielding strength of her Omega. Ava leaned down and pressed a heavy, devoted kiss to my forehead. You are going to be the death of me, Olivia Hayes, she murmured against my skin. But you are right. We walk into the light. Together. 2 hours later, a sleek, armored black Maybach pulled up to the grand entrance of the Seattle Symphony Hall. The annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was in full swing. The flashing lights of hundreds of paparazzi cameras created a blinding, strobing daylight in the middle of the dark, rainy evening. The moment the chauffeur opened my door, the deafening roar of the crowd hit me. But this time I didn't flinch. Ava stepped out first, wearing a custom pitch-black velvet tuxedo that mirrored my midnight blue gown perfectly. She reached her hand into the car. I took it, stepping out onto the red carpet. Instantly, Ava wrapped her arm firmly around my waist, pulling me flush against her side. She released a controlled, heavy wave of her dominant alpha scent, a distinct, invisible territory line that commanded absolute respect. Crowd literally parted for us. We walked up the grand marble staircase and entered the ballroom. It was a breathtaking display of unimaginable wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceilings, champagne flowed from towering pyramids, and the air was thick with the expensive perfumes and colognes of the city's elite. The moment we stepped inside, the entire room seemed to pause. Hundreds of pairs of eyes locked onto us. They were looking at the untouchable billionaire Alpha and the unknown Omega she had claimed as her bride. I kept my chin high, channeling every ounce of Ava's confidence. Her thumb rubbed soothing circles on my hip, anchoring me to reality. "Breathe, my beautiful Omega," Ava whispered in my ear, her breath tickling my neck. "You own this room." We spent the next hour mingling. Ava introduced me to senators, tech moguls, and foreign dignitaries. She kept her arms securely around me the entire time, her body naturally angling to shield me from the crowds. Whenever an alpha stepped just a fraction too close, a low, warning rumble would vibrate in Ava's chest, and they would immediately take a submissive step back. It was exhausting but exhilarating. I was surviving. And then the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt Ava's entire body go rigid against mine. Her jaw clenched tight enough to crack a tooth, and her icy blue eyes fixed onto a spot across the crowded ballroom. I followed her gaze. Walking toward us was a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a cold, aristocratic nightmare. She was strikingly tall, wearing a pristine, tailored white silk suit that stood out starkly against the sea of dark tuxedos. Her hair was a sleek silver blonde bob, and her eyes were a piercing, calculating emerald green. But it was her scent that made my stomach churn. It was the smell of bitter, burning ash and sharp citrus. It was the scent of an alpha who enjoyed breaking things just to see how they shattered. Alpha Victoria Mercer. The crowd parted for her not out of respect, but out of distinct, uncomfortable fear. Victoria stopped 3 feet away from us. A perfectly manicured, terrifyingly polite smile stretched across her red lips. "Ava, darling," Victoria purred, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. She didn't extend her hand. What an absolute triumph of a gala. "And they said you were too distracted by your sudden domestic developments to host this year." "Victoria," Ava replied, her voice an absolute glacier of cold, professional hatred. She pulled me a fraction of an inch closer. "I see my security let you through the doors." I was under the impression Vanguard Industries was too busy hemorrhaging European stock today to attend a charity event. A flash of genuine anger sparked in Victoria's green eyes, but she quickly masked it behind her porcelain smile. "A minor market fluctuation. Nothing I can't handle." Victoria's emerald gaze slowly slid off Ava and locked onto me. I felt like a mouse being stared down by a cobra. She took a deliberate step forward, attempting to push her bitter ash scent into my personal space to force an Omega submission. Before the scent could even reach me, Ava stepped entirely in front of me, physically shielding my body with her own. A feral, bone-rattling growl erupted from Ava's chest, loud enough that the surrounding guests gasped and scrambled backward. "Take another step toward my pregnant mate," Ava snarled, her eyes flashing gold, "and I will rip your throat out in front of the mayor." Victoria stopped, raising her hands in a mocking gesture of surrender. "So defensive, Ava. I simply wanted to introduce myself to the lovely Miss Hayes." Victoria leaned slightly to the side, maintaining eye contact with me over Ava's shoulder. Her polite smile completely vanished, leaving behind a look of sheer, calculating malice. "You look stunning in blue, Olivia," Victoria said softly, her voice carrying over the music. "But tell me, did Ava happen to mention the true cost of breaking a Vanguard blood contract? Because the old laws dictate that a broken arranged mating requires a life to balance the scales." Victoria's eyes dropped pointedly to my stomach. "And Vanguard always collects its debts." End of Part 8. Part 9. Because the old laws dictate that a broken arranged mating requires a life to balance the scales. And Vanguard always collects its debts. Victoria Mercer's words didn't just hang in the air, they landed like a live grenade in the center of the opulent ballroom. The utter silence that followed was so absolute, so suffocating, that I could hear the faint clink of a champagne flute being set down on a silver tray 50 feet away. For a fraction of a second, I thought Ava was going to kill her. Right there. In front of the mayor, the press, and the elite of Seattle high society. The shift in Ava was terrifyingly primal. The civilized billionaire CEO in the custom velvet tuxedo vanished, instantly replaced by a lethal, bloodthirsty apex predator. A sound erupted from Ava's chest, not a growl but a booming, bone-rattling alpha roar that physically vibrated the crystal chandeliers above us. Before Victoria could even register the danger, Ava lunged. She didn't throw a punch. She didn't need to. Ava's right hand shot out with blinding speed, her long fingers wrapping like a steel vise around Victoria's throat, right over her pristine white silk collar. With a surge of terrifying, effortless strength, Ava lifted the rival CEO completely off the ground and slammed her backward against one of the massive marble pillars. The sickening crack of Victoria's head hitting the stone echoed through the silent room. Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd, but nobody dared step forward. The sheer, crushing weight of Ava's enraged alpha pheromones flooded the ballroom. It was a suffocating, blinding wave of absolute dominance that forced several betas to their knees and made the surrounding alphas lower their eyes to the floor in immediate biological submission. "Ava!" I gasped, clutching my stomach, the sheer intensity of the energy in the room making my knees weak. Ava didn't look at me. Her blazing, solid gold eyes were locked onto Victoria, whose face was already turning a mottled, desperate shade of purple as she clawed futilely at Ava's iron grip. "You dare!" Ava snarled, her voice a demonic, vibrating whisper that carried effortlessly across the silent room. "You dare walk into my territory, breathe the same air as my mate, and threaten the life of my unborn pup?" Ava!" Victoria choked out, her emerald eyes wide with sudden, genuine terror. She had miscalculated. She had thought the public setting would restrain the Sterling alpha. She was dead wrong. "There are no old laws anymore, Victoria," Ava hissed, leaning in so close her lips brushed the shell of the gasping alpha's ear. "There is only me. If you ever look at my Omega again, if you ever speak her name, or if you even think about the child she is carrying, I will not just ruin your company. I will erase the Vanguard name from the history books. I will burn your legacy to ash, and I will make you watch." Ava released her grip instantly, stepping back and letting Victoria crumple to the marble floor like a broken rag doll. The Vanguard CEO gasped greedily for air, clutching her bruised throat, the arrogant, aristocratic sneer completely wiped from her pale face. "Marcus!" Ava barked, not taking her glowing golden eyes off the pathetic figure on the floor. The massive head of security materialized instantly from the crowd, followed by 4 elite Sterling guards. "Throw this garbage out of my building," Ava commanded ruthlessly. She turned slightly, her voice booming so every single billionaire, politician, and reporter in the room could hear her. "And let it be known to every soul in this city, any corporation, any bank, any individual that conducts a single cent of business with Vanguard Industries is now a sworn enemy of the Sterling Pack. Choose your allegiances carefully tonight, ladies and gentlemen." Marcus and his team hauled a sputtering, humiliated Victoria Mercer off the floor and dragged her out through the grand brass doors. The moment the doors slammed shut, the suffocating, heavy alpha pressure in the room vanished. The golden fire in Ava's eyes extinguished, melting back into that piercing, desperate icy blue. She spun around, ignoring the hundreds of stunned guests, and dropped to her knees right in front of me. "Olivia," she breathed, her large hands trembling violently as they flew over my body, checking my arms, my face, and finally resting firmly over my stomach. "Are you hurt? Did her scent overwhelm you? Tell me, please." "I'm okay," I whispered, my voice shaking. Tears of adrenaline were streaming down my face. I reached out, my fingers tangling in the soft lapels of her dark tuxedo, pulling her closer. "I'm okay, Ava. I'm right here. She didn't hurt me." Ava let out a ragged, agonizing sob of relief. She buried her face into the folds of my midnight blue velvet gown, right against my stomach, wrapping her arms around my waist and holding on as if I were the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. Right there, in the middle of the most prestigious gala of the year, the untouchable billionaire fell to her knees and worshipped her Omega. I didn't care about the cameras. I didn't care about the staring crowd. I buried my hands in her dark hair, releasing a steady, soothing wave of vanilla and rain, letting my Omega purr rumble quietly to calm my terrified alpha. Within minutes, Marcus returned, clearing a path for us. Ava stood up, her composure sliding perfectly back into place like a steel mask. She scooped me into her arms, completely ignoring my quiet protests that I could walk, and carried me out of the ballroom, through a set of private doors and into a secluded, soundproof VIP suite overlooking the city. She set me down gently on a plush velvet sofa, immediately pacing the length of the room like a caged snow leopard. "Ava, please sit down," I pleaded gently. "You're making yourself sick with stress." I should have killed her, Ava muttered, running a shaking hand through her perfectly styled hair, ruining it. I should have snapped her neck. That blood contract, it's an archaic Vanguard document signed by our grandfathers. It was designed to merge the families. If one party backs out, the other has the legal right to claim a life or completely assimilate the rival's assets. It hasn't been invoked in a century, but Victoria is desperate. But she can't actually touch us, right? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. We have security. We have the penthouse. Ava stopped pacing. She looked at me, her blue eyes heavy with a dark, terrifying reality. Victoria Mercer owns half the judges in the state, Olivia. She operates in the shadows. If she petitions the High Alpha Council with that contract, she could force a legal freeze on all Sterling assets, and worse, she could demand that you be turned over to neutral custody until the dispute is resolved. My blood ran completely cold. Neutral custody? They would take me away from you. I would burn the city to the ground before I let them lay a finger on you, Ava vowed fiercely, crossing the room and dropping onto the sofa beside me. She took my hands in hers, her grip desperate and tight. But there is a loophole. A very old, very absolute loophole in the Alpha laws. I swallowed hard. What is it? A Vanguard claim is completely nullified if the Sterling Alpha is already fully bonded to a legally wedded mate who is carrying an heir, Ava explained, her eyes searching mine frantically. The pact becomes closed, legally untouchable. The council cannot intervene, and the blood contract turns to dust. I stared at her, the realization slowly dawning on me. You mean, an engagement isn't enough to protect you, Ava said, her voice dropping to an agonizing, raw whisper. I need you to be my wife, Olivia. Not in a year. Not in a month. I need the absolute, undeniable legal right to protect you and our pup. She let go of my hands and slowly slipped off the velvet sofa, dropping down onto one knee on the thick, expensive rug. My breath caught in my throat. Ava reached into the inner pocket of her tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small, black velvet box. She opened it. Inside rested a breathtaking, intricate wedding band made of woven white gold, studded with flawless diamonds that caught the dim light of the suite. It was designed to curve perfectly around the massive sapphire engagement ring currently sitting on my thumb. Olivia Hayes, Ava murmured, looking up at me with an expression of such pure, unfiltered devotion that it made my heart physically ache. I brought you into this dangerous world. I turned your life upside down because my wolf was too selfish, too fiercely possessive to let you go. But I swear to you on my life, my fortune, and my soul, I will spend every second of my existence making sure you never regret it. Tears spilled over my lashes, hot and fast. I don't have a grand ceremony for you today, Ava continued, her voice breaking slightly. I don't have a cathedral or flowers or your friends. But Judge Harrison is currently having a drink in the ballroom downstairs. He owes me his career. If you say yes, if you trust me, we can bind our lives together right now. Tonight, I looked down at the towering, terrifying billionaire Alpha kneeling before me. She had fought for me. She had humiliated her greatest rival for me. She had laid her entire empire at my feet, asking for nothing but the right to protect me. I didn't see a monster. I didn't see a ruthless CEO. I saw my mate. Yes, I sobbed, throwing my arms around her neck and pulling her up from the floor. Yes, Ava. Marry me right now. Ava let out a breathless, wet laugh, crushing me to her chest. She kissed me with a desperate, bruising passion, tasting my tears and her own. 10 minutes later, the private doors of the VIP suite opened. Judge Harrison, looking incredibly flustered and pale, stepped into the room, followed by Marcus and Maria the housekeeper, who had been rushed over from the penthouse to act as our official witnesses. There was no music. There was no grand aisle. I stood in the center of the quiet suite in my midnight blue gown, my hands shaking as I held Ava's. She stared down at me, her icy blue eyes shining with unshed tears, completely ignoring the judge reading the hurried legal vows. "Do you, Ava Victoria Sterling, take Olivia Hayes to be your lawfully wedded wife and bonded mate?" the judge asked, his voice trembling slightly under the heavy alpha energy in the room. "With my entire soul I do," Ava vowed, her voice steady and absolute. She slipped the diamond-studded white gold band onto my finger, letting it rest perfectly against the heavy sapphire. "And do you, Olivia Hayes, take Ava Sterling?" I looked up at the woman who had completely stolen my life and replaced it with an empire. "I do," I whispered. "Then, by the power vested in me, and under the highest laws of this state, I pronounce you bonded for life. You may kiss your bride." Ava didn't hesitate. She cupped my face, pulling me into a kiss that sealed my fate forever. I was no longer a nobody Omega from the slums. I was Olivia Sterling. And Vanguard Industries was about to learn exactly what happened when you threatened the queen of the Sterling Empire. End of Part 9. Part 10. The heavy, gold-plated fountain pen scratched loudly against the thick parchment of the marriage certificate. As I lifted the nib, leaving the elegant looping signature of Olivia Sterling next to Ava's sharp, commanding scrawl, the heavy, suffocating weight of fear that had plagued me for the last 24 hours completely evaporated. Judge Harrison stamped the document with the official wax-sealed crest of the state, his hands still trembling slightly under the sheer, crushing weight of Ava's alpha aura. "It is done, Miss Sterling," the judge whispered, bowing his head respectfully. "The bond is legally recognized, sealed, and entered into the state's highest registry. The Sterling pack is officially closed." Ava didn't even look at him. Her icy blue eyes were entirely fixated on my left hand, where the delicate diamond-encrusted white gold band sat perfectly flush against the heavy ancestral sapphire on my thumb. She reached out, her large, warm hands gently enveloping mine, and brought my knuckles to her lips for a reverent, lingering kiss. "Marcus," Ava commanded, her voice dropping into a dark, lethal register that made the hairs on my arms stand up. She finally tore her gaze away from me, looking over my shoulder at her head of security. "Yes, Alpha," the massive Beta responded instantly, stepping forward. "Take a high-resolution scan of this marriage certificate," Ava ordered, her eyes flashing with a dangerous, triumphant gold. "Send it directly to my lead counsel, the Alpha Council Registry, and immediately leak it to every major news outlet currently stationed in the ballroom downstairs. Then, I want you to personally deliver a physical copy to Victoria Mercer's penthouse. Hand it to her. Tell her that the Sterling heir is legally protected by the highest laws of this land, and that her archaic blood contract is now nothing more than toilet paper." Marcus allowed a rare, grim smile to touch his lips. "With pleasure, ma'am. And what about Margaret Vance?" "Release Margaret's signed confession regarding the corporate espionage and attempted assault on my mate to the federal authorities," Ava stated coldly, adjusting the lapels of her pitch-black velvet tuxedo. "By tomorrow morning, Vanguard Industries will be under federal investigation. Their stock will flatline before the opening bell. Victoria wanted a war over legacy? I am going to erase hers from the face of the earth." As Marcus and the judge hurried out of the VIP suite to execute her ruthless commands, we were finally left completely alone. The deafening silence of the soundproof room wrapped around us. Ava turned back to me. The lethal, bloodthirsty CEO vanished in the blink of an eye, melting away into the fiercely devoted, gentle Alpha who had held my hand in the dark. She stepped into my space, wrapping her strong arms around my waist and pulling me flush against her body. The intoxicating, heavy scent of crushed pine needles, dark chocolate, and ozone washed over me, but it was different now. It wasn't just a protective shield, it was a permanent tether. Our scents were mingling, the sweet vanilla and rain of my Omega biology intertwining flawlessly with hers, creating a brand new, unique signature that signaled to the entire world that we belonged to one another. "My wife," Ava breathed, the words tumbling from her lips like a sacred prayer. She rested her forehead against mine, her eyes closing as she let out a long, ragged exhale of pure relief. "You are my wife, Olivia. Nobody can ever touch you. You are completely, untouchably mine. And you are mine, I whispered back, my hands sliding up the silk lapels of her jacket to cup her sharp jawline. No more running. No more hiding. We build our family together, Ava. A breathtaking, genuine smile broke across Ava's face, illuminating her icy blue eyes with a warmth I had never seen before. She scooped me up into her arms, pressing a bruising, passionate kiss to my lips, and carried me out of the suite, ready to face our empire. 7 months later, the Seattle rain lashed aggressively against the reinforced floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the penthouse, but inside, the temperature was a perfect, comfortable 72 degrees. I stood by the glass, looking out over the sprawling city skyline, resting a steaming mug of decaf chamomile tea on the windowsill. I rested my other hand securely beneath my massive, swollen stomach. Nearly 9 months pregnant, I felt like I was carrying a small boulder. Custom silk maternity gown I wore draped elegantly over my curves, but nothing could hide the undeniable evidence of the Sterling heir ready to make their grand entrance into the world. The last 7 months had been an absolute whirlwind of unimaginable change. Ava had kept every single one of her ruthless promises. The morning after our impromptu gala wedding, the news of our bond and Vanguard's illegal espionage had shattered the financial world. Victoria Mercer had been dragged out of her corporate headquarters in federal handcuffs, her empire completely dismantled and absorbed by Sterling Enterprises within a matter of weeks. The threat was neutralized, eradicated so thoroughly that the Vanguard name became a taboo whisper in high society. With the war won, Ava had turned her terrifying, obsessive focus entirely onto me. She had transformed the cold, museum-like penthouse into a warm, vibrant home. The spare room down the hall had been converted into a breathtaking nursery painted in soft creams and midnight blues, filled with the finest, safest furniture money could buy. She had hired private chefs to cater to my bizarre pregnancy cravings, adjusted her billion-dollar schedule to attend every single ultrasound, and spent her evenings reading to my stomach, her deep, rumbling voice vibrating against my skin and lulling the pup to sleep. I was pulled from my thoughts by the soft ding of the private elevator. Heavy, familiar footsteps echoed on the mahogany floorboards. I didn't even need to turn around. The rich, dominant scent of pine and dark chocolate preceded her, instantly making my Omega wolf purr in contentment. 2 strong, long arms wrapped securely around my waist from behind. Ava pulled my back flush against her chest, burying her face in the crook of my neck, right over my scent gland. She inhaled deeply, a soft, exhausted sigh escaping her lips. "You're working late," I murmured, leaning back into her solid warmth. "The Japanese acquisition took longer than anticipated," Ava grumbled softly, her large hands splaying protectively over my swollen belly. Instantly, as if sensing its alpha, the baby delivered a sharp, energetic kick right against Ava's palm. Ava gasped, her icy blue eyes widening in awe as she looked down at my stomach. Even after months of feeling the baby move, the sheer biological miracle of it still managed to render the ruthless billionaire completely speechless. "Fierce," Ava whispered, a deeply proud, rumbling chuckle vibrating in her chest. "Definitely an alpha. They have my impatience. Or an omega with my stubbornness," I teased, turning in her arms to loop my hands loosely around her neck. Ava smiled, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss to my lips. But before our lips could even meet, a sudden agonizing cramp ripped through my lower abdomen. It was so violent, so blindingly sharp, that my breath hitched and the mug of chamomile tea slipped from my hand, shattering against the mahogany floorboards. "Olivia?" Ava's relaxed demeanor instantly evaporated. Her eyes flashed gold, her alpha instincts slamming into overdrive as I gripped her shoulders, letting out a pained gasp. A warm rush of fluid soaked the inner thighs of my silk gown. "Ava!" I gasped, looking up at my panicked wife, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Ava, it's time. The baby is coming." "Marcus!" Ava roared, her voice echoing through the massive penthouse with terrifying volume. The next hour was a blur of absolute, highly coordinated chaos. Marcus and the elite security team had us in the armored Maybach and rushing through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle within 3 minutes. Ava sat in the back seat with me, her face pale as a sheet, completely abandoning her stoic CEO persona. She held my hand in a crushing grip, her other hand frantically wiping the sweat from my forehead, whispering heavy, desperate promises of protection into my ear as I breathed through the agonizing contractions. By the time we burst through the doors of the private VIP maternity wing at Sterling Memorial Hospital, Dr. Vance and her top-tier medical team were already waiting. They rushed me into a sprawling, state-of-the-art delivery suite. Pain was blinding, an all-consuming fire that threatened to pull me under. But through the haze of agony, the one constant grounding force was the overpowering, intoxicating scent of my alpha. Ava never left my side for a single second. She braced her arm behind my shoulders, supporting my weight, letting me crush the bones in her hand with every agonizing push. "You are doing so beautifully, my brave Omega," Ava choked out, tears openly streaming down her sharp cheekbones, completely unashamed of her vulnerability. "Just a little more. Bring our pup to me, Olivia. You can do this." With one final earth-shattering scream that tore my throat raw, I pushed with every single ounce of strength left in my exhausted body. And then the pain stopped. A profound, echoing silence filled the sterile room for exactly 2 seconds. Then a loud, healthy, furious cry pierced the air. I collapsed back against the pillows, gasping for breath, my vision swimming with exhausted tears. Dr. Vance smiled warmly from the foot of the bed, quickly clearing the baby's airways and wrapping the tiny, squalling infant in a soft, heated blanket. "Congratulations, Ms. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling," Dr. Vance said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a perfectly healthy, incredibly strong little girl." Dr. Vance walked over and gently placed the bundled blanket onto my bare chest. I looked down, completely paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of love that crashed over me. She was tiny, perfectly formed, with a tuft of raven-black hair just like her mother's. As she felt the warmth of my skin and caught my vanilla scent, her furious crying slowly subsided into soft, tiny whimpers. Ava leaned over us, her massive frame trembling violently. She reached out with a single shaking finger, gently stroking the impossibly soft skin of our daughter's cheek. The baby shifted, her tiny, incredibly small fist reaching out to blindly grasp Ava's index finger. A choked, raw sob ripped from Ava's throat. The untouchable, ruthless billionaire Alpha buried her face in the crook of my neck, weeping openly, her broad shoulders shaking as she held her family. "She's perfect," Ava whispered fiercely, her lips pressing 100 frantic, devoted kisses against my temple. "She is absolutely perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for my life." I smiled, turning my head to catch Ava's lips in a soft, exhausted kiss. I looked down at the heavy, square-cut sapphire ring resting on my thumb, glittering under the harsh hospital lights, and then at the tiny, beautiful life resting on my chest. I thought back to that freezing, miserable night in my tiny apartment. Terror of the 3 blinking dots. The sheer, blinding panic of realizing I had accidentally sent my deepest secret to the most dangerous alpha in the city because my trembling thumb had swapped 2 digits. It was supposed to be a disaster. It was supposed to be the end of my quiet life. Instead, it was the beginning of an empire. I pulled my wife and my daughter closer, wrapping my arms around the family I never thought I would have, and smiled. Sending that ultrasound to the wrong number was, without a single doubt, the greatest mistake I had ever made. End of story. Wow. Who knew that a single ultrasound photo sent to the wrong number could completely change the fate of an entire empire? In this story, we didn't just witness a simple misunderstanding. We saw how Olivia's despair on that freezing Seattle night transformed into incredible strength through the unwavering protection of a ruthless billionaire alpha like Ava Sterling. We watched the terrifying, untouchable CEO slowly tear down her walls out of pure love for Olivia and their unborn daughter. And that showdown at the gala against Victoria Mercer's treacherous plans. Ava literally burning the Vanguard Empire to ashes to protect Olivia was absolutely breathtaking. Seeing them finally rise above all that chaos and danger to build their own happy ending definitely touched all of our hearts. But what did you guys think about this epic story? Which scene had you on the edge of your seat? Was it Ava's ultimate display of dominance at the gala, or Olivia facing her fears and proudly carrying the weight of being an alpha's mate? Please share your thoughts with me down in the comments below. I will be reading every single one of them. If you enjoyed this girl love story, the intense dynamics, and all the billionaire alpha drama, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel right now to support me. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our next thrilling stories. Thank you all so much for sticking with me until the very last second of this 10-part journey and sharing in Olivia and Ava's story. This channel wouldn't be here without your amazing support. I will see you in the next breathtaking story. Until then, take care and bye for now.